It is Sunday afternoon, evening. Welcome to Haberman and Middlecoff. I'm Guy, that's John, and we're brought to you by our friends at Tito's Handmade Vodka. Tito's Handmade Vodka, however you enjoy, whenever you enjoy. This was the weekend to really start enjoying Tito's Handmade Vodkas. Where it's at, John. Numero uno. What do you like to mix it with?
You know, I'm a Tito's soda guy. I think that's the go-to for all of us attempting to be skinny individuals, but I don't think you can go wrong. You know, you can go Tito's 7-Up, Tito's and Sprite. I had a Tito's Mule on Friday night, which is fantastic. That's hard to beat. I would say any vodka drink, you just say Tito's, and it's an immediate winner. A lot like the Rams today against the shitty version of Seattle.
Yeah, there were a few games that felt like immediate winners. Tito's Handmade Vodka. Tag us in photos. Show us you enjoying. Distilled and bottled in Austin, Texas. 40% alcohol by volume, namely 80 proof, crafted to be savored responsibly. We're going to try and stay locked in here at the beginning of the show because the afternoon games are ending, and they're pretty good. And some of them have implications, so we can talk about that as the day goes along. But actually, really good afternoon slate.
I think they did this on purpose. What do you think?
Just inject you with a big dose of the drug on the first week?
Well, we know Sunday night's their biggest television show. That's been Cowboys-Giants, whether they were 3-win teams or like legit playoff teams like they are now. They've been doing that, I feel like, our entire adult life. Some semblance of Giants at Cowboys or Cowboys at Giants, which hard to blame them. I do think the afternoon games, clearly the Sunday, the Fox and CBS games have clearly been the second biggest television shows consistently on in America. That I think they know what they're doing now. Because once buys start happening, there are definitely some weeks where it feels like there are just 3 games, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes just a 1 o'clock game and then like 2 1:25 games on each network. Chargers lost. Shocker.
In a shootout. I mean, Tua threw for almost 500 yards. Tyreek went for 215 on 11 carries and 2 tugs.
Yeah, him and Brandon Ayuk look very similar today.
Tua 466 in the win over Herbert, who went for 228. So the Kellen Moore era. They scored points though.
He looked. I thought Herbert looked good.
But I mean, we're bearing
Staley stinks.
John, we're bearing the lead here. Jimmy Garoppolo is 1-0 as the Raiders quarterback.
Yeah, it was a good day for Jimmy and Brock. You know, thriving as starting quarterbacks in the National Football League.
20-26. Russell Wilson did not hit the above on my prize picks above his passing yards for the day. 177.
That's what Russell Wilson threw for today?
177, yeah.
It's weird. You know, this $4 on DirecTV, I got to really master it with my eyes. I don't think I quite know what I'm doing yet. But every time I would give him a couple back-to-back snaps, he definitely looks a little sprier. He looks, I thought, just a little
skinnier
more,
too, right?
Just looks a little better.
Yeah.
Looks better for sure. I think he was like 17 and 19 in the first half.
27 to 34, but 170. 34 throws for 77 yards. A lot of throws for 177 yards.
Big time.
I'm with you on the YouTube TV. It's amazing how easy versus DirecTV it is. The whole world's been waiting for this, but I do not have a good handle on the best way to watch. Too much.
No, me either.
Too much. Well, I mean, how about this, John? The Niners 30-7 win over the Steelers. The largest Steelers home loss in the Tomlin era, and the worst home loss by the Steelers since they lost 31-7 to the Ravens in 2006. This was a game where most of the money was on the Steelers. I think I saw 80% of the money was on the Steelers. There was a lot of like sneaky upset Steelers picks. I saw this morning Jimmy Johnson. On Friday, Good Morning Football, our boy Peter Schrager. There was a lot of like, I'm picking the Steelers. I'm going to go out on a limb and pick the Steelers. And it turned out everybody was on the same limb. And then the Niners. I mean, was it the biggest ass kicking of the NFL Sunday? It was close if it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Atlanta or Carolina can get counted as an important game that no one outside of those two cities paid any attention to, or less fantasy football people that just checked online.
Yeah.
I will say this. I just looked. Wikipedia doesn't have it quite updated yet. For a long period of time, and rightfully so, Kyle was just this weird anomaly of they were having success and he was well under 500. He's now 53 and 46, so he's 3 games away. And I would imagine I thought they were going to be
Wait,
enormous
he's
favorites
53 wins and 46 losses?
in the regular season.
Okay.
And I thought that they were going to be, before, when the game ended, probably like a 7-point favorite against the Rams when I assumed that they were going to lose. Obviously, I think that game looks a little bit differently. Maybe the Rams early on are going to fight hard, so maybe that number, I haven't seen the line. But he's got a chance pretty early this season to get that number to above 10 games, which is a pretty big swing because not that long ago, he was well under 500.
Yeah.
For a guy that had been to a Super Bowl. And even the year after that they won like 10 games, remember, and they rattled off the year they beat the Packers and the Cowboys, his playoff record, he had 4 wins. He's battled. Last year clearly helped, the 13 wins. I don't know about you, but they clearly feel like a 13-win team again. You could argue, I guess 14-3. It's hard. 14-3 would be a remarkable record in a 17-game season, right? I mean, it's a 13. I would say 13 wins is the old 14. That's fantastic. Most years, I think 13 is going to give you a pretty good chance at the number 1 seed. Last year, the Eagles got it at 14, and remember, they had that stretch of their schedule. It was like, God, who's the Eagles going to lose to?
Yeah.
It's their schedule, just because these two divisions play now, is much harder. And listen, I don't view the Steelers. I might have to, rein it in a little bit. I don't think Super Bowl contender might, but I still think when the dust settles, they're going to be better than they showed today. That was a complete ass kicking against a team that has a lot of good players.
Niners. Wrong podcast. Niners opened as 4.5-point favorites against the Rams, John. They are now 6 or 6.5, depending on where you look, favorites against the Rams on the road next week.
I think if that score today had been flip-flopped, which I would imagine, if I would have told you, I'm pretty sure it was the final score 27-13, Seattle against the Rams, or excuse me, Rams against Seattle. If I told you that was the final score, you would have assumed it was 30-13. If I told you at the beginning of the day the score of that game is going to be 30-13, you're like, wow, Seattle kicked their ass. I think you could have said, well, hey, maybe, and after you watch that 49ers ass whooping, could the Niners be a 8.5-point? Like, they could have been a huge favorite if Seattle, or if the Rams just look lifeless up there, right?
Yeah.
Just look like Cooper Kupp's on injured reserve. I mean, the 49ers really start to finish, in a weird way, for a week 1 game. It kind of got boring after the Christian McCaffrey, because it was just like, they're not coming back. Well, this isn't even a game.
Well, it was one of those games, and you've always railed against this for years, where people are like, get your starters out. And you're like, there's only 46 guys that can play. Your starters, you can't just start taking guys out. But we did get pretty early, I think, to the point in the game. I think you would agree with me on this. One guy that doesn't apply to, like, Fred Warner and Mooney Ward are just going to have to play. That shouldn't apply to Christian McCaffrey. And
But
Kyle,
that's just not how coaches work. I
understand,
we
but
can
I'm
argue
saying
it all day long. It's pointless.
I'm not arguing it with you. I'm saying Christian should be in a different category than most other guys because he does play a position. No one ever says, well, linebackers after 500 snaps, you know what happens to them. But he just keeps running McCaffrey into a wall. But my point is, whether we debate it or not, the point of what I'm saying is that came really early in the game, right? That came like just after halftime, that thought, after his big run, really.
I do think it's a legit debate, and we had it since last year. It's just clearly not going to change, so it's pointless to waste our breath on it, because today was an incredible opportunity for Kyle just to, even if you're not, I would have given some touches to Mason in the third, fourth quarter. Just hammer Elijah Mitchell for a couple series, and that's just not how they're going to operate. And honestly, NFL teams, for the most part, do not operate that way, because he'd go 20 points. That's a fumbled 6 and a 3 and out, and they're right back in the game. And he's right. This is not. So I've kind of come around a little bit. The NFL is just so different than college football, right? Just in terms of point swings. How fast?
Yeah, Caleb Williams hasn't finished a game yet at USC in 3 games.
Yeah,
I don't know if he's played the second half much.
They were up last night, 49-3 at half?
Yeah.
But even when you're up 27-7, you're just another touchdown and 3 and out away from them getting back in a game in the NFL, and especially against good teams. I think the Niners are a good example. If they're, let's say, down, they're going to have a game this year where it's like 17-0, right? The other coach would be like, we're fucking a Debo broken tackle and Christian McCaffrey all of a sudden for it being 17-14 before we blink. A Mooney Ward pick 6, a Hufanga cause fumble. They get in the red zone. Shit happens fast. So Kyle approached this game. I thought he was trying to run up the score. Like he was approaching like a playoff game.
Looking for AP votes, you thought?
Why they were throwing it definitely in the third quarter, but even early in the fourth when it felt pretty out of touch, right, for the Steelers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why are you dropping him back and McKivitz is going to get him killed? But again, like I'm not, like that's just, he's going to operate, and this all gets back to, unless you're up 49-3 USC style, NFL coaches in general do not. He's not an outlier like that, right?
No,
they
he's
just
not
keep the foot
like
to the
that.
pedal.
Yeah.
Everyone is. That's just the way the NFL is. And I think sometimes we think in our head, and I'm guilty of this too, and it's just not the case, that the game is way more out of reach than it actually is.
Yeah, he's looking at it like one fumble here, which my backup running backs do fumble. One fumble here, and it's 27-14, and then 1 3 and out, and I'm putting to them, and they're scoring, and all of a sudden they score, and it's a one-score game. That's what he's thinking.
And you only get so many games, so if we get a chance to score 40 points, doesn't that build momentum moving forward? It's not like we're not wasting points here. We want as many points as we can have. We want to get good vibes going. We've started slow. Look at last year. I mean, they lost to the fucking Bears, who are still terrible.
At the end of the day, 25 touches for McCaffrey, I think is probably right. Maybe a little on the high end, but that's around where, if you go back and look, like his big games, that's where he was last year. So I don't think that's out of the realm. I mean, I'd prefer him at like 18, but whatever. Ultimately, it's just they put that thing away early. Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, but it just gets back to, because I don't think it's crazy to have that thought. I think most human beings watch today like, why are you just running this guy? That's just not the way he's going to be operated with. It's like, we're paying this guy $14 million. He's one of our best players. We're just going to keep him toting the rock. Because I got a couple texts like, why do they keep giving it to him? I was like, well, meet the Shanahans.
I think to me, the overarching thing, and
Trent's in there, all these other players are in there. It's football.
Yeah. But I mean, the running back, we don't need to spend much time on this. The running back position is different in that you do use that position differently than you use almost every other position, right?
Why I thought today was again, I feel like I'm nitpicking and there's no point. I feel like I'm being negative. It was an incredible performance for a team that came out ready to beat the shit out of another good team. I think if you just turn on the television tomorrow, a lot of people, when the Steelers come up, it'll be a lot of negativity around them. I will be stunned if that team doesn't win 10 games. And they made Kenny Pickett, who, I mean, they made him look like a scrub. They did. They were fucking his world up all game long. I thought Najee looks. This might be a big picture thing for them to worry about. They made him look like a bust. Like, that's not a first round pick.
Well, to me, the thing that applied to Pickett and it applied to Najee, and actually, that's a good point. I agree with you on that. And I was thinking about this on Friday. We don't really, in the preseason, the Niners have so many good players, and Kyle balances off days for all of them. Forget about games. Even when you go to practice and then you add the Bosa holdout to it, you never really get to see them just starting quarterback, starting left tackle, starting running back, 3 starting receivers, starting tight end. You don't really see it ever at a practice. Like there were no practices, right? Because of the Bosa holdout where you saw all their all pros or all their pro bowlers on the field together. And even if Bosa had been there, I mean, probably could have counted on like maybe two hands you would need. How many days they just have everybody in pads and practicing. McCaffrey had plenty off days. Brock was taking days off. So I did have that thought Friday. Like one thing,
this isn't the NBA. This isn't the NBA. You play when you get to the games. You play in the NFL.
Right? Yeah, and I think one thing that you just think about what it looks like when that group is together. I was reminded today of when you watch them last year. When you watch them that is what it looks like when all their guys are together, because nobody had more multi-score wins in the NFL than they did last year. Like they kick people's ass. They do it pretty regularly. And they did it today at a place where that team's ass doesn't get kicked. Not with that coach.
Well, if you're fourth best, and honestly, it might not even be fair to call him your fourth best, but technically on the hierarchy, if you just went around and asked people to rank the 4 guys, most people are going to put Ayuk fourth, of McCaffrey, Debo, Kittle, and him. If that is your fourth, or you could even look at it from a more positive standpoint. If that's your 4, no one's matching that. No one is. I mean, the Eagles can't match that, right? Because who's their 4th? They got AJ, Devontae, Goddard, and clearly Jalen, now that he's got all the money, is not going to run like he had to 2 years ago to prove himself. I don't blame him, right? And I bet the Eagles are telling him, like, hey, man, we can't have you hurting your shoulder, right? We need you to pass.
Yeah.
Because that happened last year, and I think they got scared that they were going to lose. Because before the Purdy injury, remember, like a month before, I think the Eagles were on pins and needles. So one thing's clear. If you got a really good quarterback and you got those weapons, and I would say the difference between the Eagles now and the 49ers, and we'll see, we're recording this before the Giants game and the Cowboys game, is the Eagles lost the guy kind of fucking making the chess pieces move around. It's not their head coach, so they have Brian Johnson, who you can give me a million athletic puff pieces on the guy. He's got to do it. Like we saw Shane Steichen do it. It's the Niners' number one attribute, just like it's the Chiefs' number one attribute. They're never losing the most important guy in the building. Tomlin does sometimes, right? They kind of ebb and flow. We talk about that. The Harbaugh brothers, they're very dependent on their coordinators. The Niners, as long as they got those players on defense, and as long as their head coach is there, he's the guy calling the plays. Because I was texting someone about Mike McDaniel. Like, Mike McDaniel's clearly really good, and that would have directly impacted a ton of CEO-level head coaches. But ultimately, he was just a suggester to Kyle, right?
Right. But a high-level one, clearly.
Incredible. I mean, Mike McDaniel's sweet.
That's the beauty of hiring the offensive coach, right? You hire the defensive coach, the play caller, your quarterback's best friend, your receiver's best friend, your running back's best friend can get taken from you. And yeah, I mean, it's. I would love to know, like, what are the inefficiencies, or maybe Bobby Slowick, and then he took over for Mike, and there was no inefficiencies, and now the Kubiaks take over for Bobby, and Kyle just has them so well trained that you don't notice the difference, because you don't notice the difference. That's the thing. You don't notice a difference.
No.
I mean, we'll talk about Brock. Speaking of don't notice a difference, the other thing to me today, John, was just, and it's a testament to Kyle. It's also a testament to the players they have. Some of them they picked, some of them they didn't on defense. They've gone through Robert Saleh to D'Amico Ryans to Steve Wilkes, and their defense looks the same from an effort standpoint. You know, they're all three of them a little different personality-wise. And maybe it's just as simple as that's, as an organization, they emphasize those guys, and so they get Fred Warner, and they get Nick Bosa, and they get Eric Armstead, who was good. Their D-line was really good today. Someone I just saw in the chat said even Kinlaw made some plays. They kicked ass at the line of scrimmage. Their linebackers, Fred and Dre Greenlaw, who nobody can borderline get an unnecessary roughness on every snap like Dre Greenlaw can. But, I mean, Hufanga, it's pretty incredible. They look exactly the same from an effort standpoint on defense.
I was watching the game with Maria, and you know, it's one of those early plays about Dre Greenlaw with like could have been easily called for like 7 penalties on the play. And she's like, "Where's he from?" And I was like, "He's from the South." And so I Wikipedia'd him. His story, I need to text some scouts, like grew up in foster homes, kind of a positive Michael Orr, like there's no questioning, I don't think. Got like officially adopted when he was 20 by the guy that kind of became like his coach and mentor, I think, early on in his teens. Pretty incredible story. And the 49ers in this group, I think, have identified from a character standpoint the guys they like. And they made a decision, I think it was last off season when they extended him. And they got him at a relative, one of their classic, they were paying him how much? He's better than most teams' best linebacker. And he is, obviously Fred is the best middle linebacker in the league. I think he's universally considered that. But even Fred is very outspoken. Like, to have a running mate that's that good, it's not quite Bowman and Willis in their prime, but relative to, you just watch around the league, I mean, it's as good as a 2 linebacker tandem as you're going to see. I mean, the speed in which those two play and the violence in which they play. That's the other thing. Like, and even Dre relative to 2023 is not, this isn't like, you know, Hittner and Golson and even Willis. I mean, those guys they're much more modern, but they are hitting at a level that the Steelers are a physical defense. We're not matching there. I mean, the Hufanga hits are, again, they've been coached. This is why I've always been anti the kicking kids out in college. Like 2023, everyone's on the same page. I'm not saying you're not going to have mistakes and guys deserve to get flagged, but everyone knows what they're doing now, like in terms of the safety, and it's all been implemented since the youth. And I think when you watch football, it's dramatically much more under control. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not guilty about saying this. I miss the violence of the football that from the 90s and 2000s. I understand why they had to change. But like you watch today, the Niners are the highest level of being able to be violent at an NFL level, which is still dramatically more violent than every level of football, but like playing in a safe way relative to what it was. You see some of these highlights from like John Lynch days or Ronnie Lott's days where like those guys would be tossed out of the league.
I thought it was a great point during the game by who's the analyst? Was it Moose? No.
I think it was because they showed the Steve Young highlight, and he said that was a shitty game for me.
Moose, when he's like, Hufanga did a good job of protecting Freiermuth when he hit him in the end zone. I mean, crushed him, right? Shoulder to the sternum. Yeah, it was.
But isn't that a good example of like 15 years ago? That's hitting the guy in the head, and he's laying there.
Yeah. And
he still got,
he
still got the wind knocked out of him.
Right. I mean, Freiermuth popped up and is like, he did him a favor. Actually, I think, was that Ambry in coverage? Actually did break up the pass before Hufanga got there. It was a pretty good play.
I thought their DBs, until clearly they called off the dogs in the game, it felt like 10 minutes of it, they started playing very, very soft coverage. We're really good today. And the Steelers have clearly a lot of speed at wide receiver. Even their randoms, you just assume they're good.
Brock Purdy made history today, became the first NFL quarterback to win his first 6 career regular season starts and throw for at least 2 touchdowns in each of those starts. I just got a text while we're sitting here, John, from a former NFL quarterback, and he said, Brock Purdy is such a stud. And I said, tell me what you love about him. And he said, he never gets overwhelmed, which most guys that have very little experience like him can't do consistently.
It's crazy. You wouldn't think John Elway would like that type quarterback, given that he was big, fast, and strong.
Yeah.
I mean, for him to be a believer in Brock Purdy, what he's telling you right there.
Took me a second. Don't out Elway. Not far off, though, John, actually. Not far off.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, he's good. I text with a buddy who's down on him. Now, this buddy has, I would say, an agenda, given the team he's on. Thinks he's a little overhyped. He thinks it's closer to Pickett. He's like, if you flip-flopped him, the scheme. And it's like, listen, I know you watch him in one-off situations. I don't think he's a scheme-oriented guy. He benefits from having good players around him, right? But he makes plays. I guess my ultimate point is no one's anointing him as like a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. But relative to the Shanahan run, they won a ton of games with Jimmy, who clearly, relative to the rest of his peers, probably 15, 16, 17 range, right? That's where Jimmy sits.
Yeah.
This guy is better. Now, I'm not saying he's got to do it longer to be better than, to just be considered better than Carr, Cousins. I think most people in a weird way would think Jimmy's better than Carr. That one's a complicated one. Dak. But, like, I just watch Brock Purdy and go, like, I think he makes a lot of plays outside the construct of the offense.
He does. I mean, I think his feel at times, Jimmy felt like he had good feel for the game, Garoppolo, but Brock more consistently has good feel for what's happening, I think.
Did you see the pick Jimmy threw today?
I don't think I did.
He threw a baby zone pick. Classic, in the pocket, nothing's there, does his scramble. Purdy does the same thing. Pocket, nothing there, I'm a scramble. And he scrambles into just kind of open area. So it's just like, he's just kind of sitting here cooking. He's doing some of these. They both do it. When Purdy lets the ball go, I don't want to say 100% confident. I'm not acting like he's Peyton Manning or Tom Brady releasing the football. I feel pretty confident at this point. When Jimmy threw it, I'm all, here we go. Into coverage, ball straight up in the air, lands in a DB's, breadbasket. He hits the ground, turnover. Almost cost them the game. Obviously, it didn't because they won, but it was a classic. And I think everything has to be compared to Jimmy because they won so many games with Jimmy.
Right.
And this guy is much better. So they have to have a better chance. They were a Super Bowl contender with Jimmy Garoppolo. This guy's better, clearly. Eye test, stat-wise, it's not even debatable. How are they not just a better team, right? If most of the other stuff around him is the same.
How about the play where he rolled left? Well, not rolled left, scrambled left, stops, turns, flips his hips, and you're like, I don't, it does happen with Brock still where I'm like, I don't know if he can trigger this ball fast enough given where the defender is. He stops, flips, triggers, and Debo is like diving back the other way to make the catch right before Purdy got hit on a 2nd and 8, and it was a first down. It was a really, really impressive play. And he's more athletic than Jimmy. Debo made several, and Ayuk consistently does. Ayuk also gets wide ass open a lot for a guy who's, obviously very good, but that's part of it. But I thought
he gets clearly treated like the number 2, and Brock and Kyle know it. You right?
Yeah, almost like 2.5 because I think McCaffrey, is part of that. They've got a really complicated thing to try and stop, and we talk so much about what the Niners gave up for Trey. We never really talk about the value that McCaffrey has given them. Is if you knew he would be this, you would have had to. You already knew he was special. If you had known he'd been this, you would have traded more for him. You would have happily traded more for McCaffrey.
Well, I think his value around the league would have gone up a lot, right? Because I think most people's initial reaction with a running back is just this is what made him and this is where a lot of people argue about scheme specific, right? The 49ers are McCaffrey wouldn't be as good on the Chiefs, right? They just would not, like a lot of his big plays, he's obviously good in the passing game, do happen in the run game. I mean, his run today where he does the little 360 broken tackle to the house, Ayuk's, Andy just doesn't run it consistently. And they are, once the dust settles, Chiefs will be fine. But my point is, his best attribute, and I underrated this coming out, he's an unreal running back. Like
between the tackles.
Between the tackle power back. And I remember you always said this because David Shaw hammered this till no one would listen. You guys are underselling him how good of a true running back he is.
Yeah.
And he is like the way we talk about the Adrian Petersons and the Derrick Henry. So that immediately makes a quarterback's life a little easier, right? But I'd go back to like the Jimmy 19 team. That team had more of a group of guys, but they were an unreal running team. When your running game is good, it makes it easier on you. But Brock does make... the pass he made on Patrick Peterson to Ayuk in the corner, what's the worst case scenario that happened? Probably gets broken up. Like, that's a good miss,
Did you see what he said after the game?
I did, yeah. He's not gonna.
Brock was just like, was that on Peterson? Everyone's like, yeah. And he just smiled. I thought that was the right way to handle it. And then he said, I also think
Brock grew up in Arizona when Peterson was sweet. It's not like, I bet he doesn't even not like the guy.
No, I think he's got a ton of respect for him. I think it's part of what makes Brock attractive as a player is that he doesn't shy away from that. It doesn't intimidate him, and he actually is happy to try and beat Patrick Peterson. Like, that's the fun of playing at the highest level and being in the big leagues, is you hit against other big leaguers, and can I get a hit against this guy? Patrick Peterson made a couple of really good plays early in the game. I wonder if he thought he was going to pick off one of those Kittle throws, I think.
I think he thought exactly the middle of the field, those digging ins that, all the 49ers and all the people that have played in this offense, like, they live for that play over the middle. And so I bet Patrick Peterson's like, that's what I was going to get.
Yeah.
He's not an outside corner anymore at the highest level because he's not that fast. I do, like, the one thing that's going to happen, he will have games like this, which he has not in his career. He will throw some pick sixes and picks, right? He gets close. And I give him credit, and I think this is why they like him, is when Jimmy would let it go, it was like, bro, that's not even close. Well, what the fuck are you doing? Any coach, I think, can live with a 50-50 ball if it's thrown to a guy like, we're paying Debo $60 million. George Kittle's a guy that when you do restructures, we plan on having a guy on the team for a decade, right? He's going to go down as one of the great Niners of this era. Even Ayuk now has established himself. Like, you throw the ball up. But he does put some balls in places when he's scrambling around that he could have thrown the pick to Peterson. Again, I'm good with that. Like, I don't need – one of the things Aaron Rodgers hangs his hat on has the lowest interception percentage in the league history. It's like, that's never going to be Purdy's. I know technically it might be, but it won't be over a period of time, and that's fine as long as you're getting 3 and 4 touchdowns. Remember we said when they were going to transition to Trey Lance, it was like, listen – Jimmy just hovered around like 1.5 touchdowns a game, it felt like. If you can get to like averaging around 3, I can live with 12 picks. But clearly that was never going to happen. if Purdy's going to be on a 30 to 35 touchdown level play, you can live with 9 picks. Because you're going to win so many games. You're so much better than so many teams. You could probably close your eyes to 10 wins, and then those other, it might be the difference between like 12 and 14 or whatever, but those are first-class problems.
Yeah, because he's going to make the basic plays, and he does make plus plays, which I think is the biggest question with Brock over time. Will he keep making all these plus plays? You make plus plays, you know. It's like Asante Samuel's thing, right? Is like, man, he got a lot of interceptions, but you could get him to bite and you'd beat him deep. But he was one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. Giveth and taketh. I mean, they threw the ball on a 4th and 1 early in the game. Now, it was a simple throw, but I think even Kyle made the point after the game. George got kind of bumped off, and luckily it was a really good throw from Brock, so George could catch it and just turn upfield.
It wasn't a seamless layup.
No, but they made it look that way.
Yeah. Well, and this is why everything that happened over the last 12 months
Here we
really
go.
separated.
Here we go.
This is why, right? That pass, accuracy. I was had a sober Saturday night. I was like, I'm going to really take in today. Get up early, go to the gym, had Fox on, and I could hear it. One thing, Jimmy Johnson, because all of a sudden I look over and I see a picture of Trey Lance in a Cowboys uniform, and the 5 of them. Gronk's in the middle. You got Terry screaming. You got Howie and Menifee and Michael Strahan, and then Jimmy's like, accuracy, guys, accuracy. I don't care if it's 1970s or 2023 with the rules. You have to be an accurate quarterback. And clearly this guy has on the basic stuff. He obviously brings more to the table, right? The basic stuff, he's really accurate on the touch. Like, those are plays that if you just watched it really quick, you'd be like, oh, this is a basic. It's clearly not an easy NFL play because the timing's a little off. You kind of got to back up, and then you got to hit him in stride. There were a couple plays today you see with Fields, with Love, with some of these random quarterbacks. Mack had his moments early in the game. Now, granted, it was raining. Like, the difference between hitting a guy in stride and not hitting a guy in stride is the difference of first downs, touchdowns, punts. I mean,
How about the Kenny Pickett, John? The throw over the middle, it would have been a touchdown. He throws it behind Deontay Johnson, right?
He was, I mean, the Steelers better hope that was just a real off game, because I thought even sometimes when he's had throws to be there, he was just like, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
Could not be a positive experience right now if you're a Steeler fan. Like, what? Or you could just have to chalk it up. Is that the best defense we're going to play all year?
Yeah, it might be. I mean, the same, like, if you were going to nitpick a couple things, we can get to a couple nitpicks. Well, I'll get to that in a second. I do want to say this, not to bring up Trey again, but because I said this earlier, and someone's like, why are you talking about Trey? This is not a Trey point. But the people who told you that Trey should have been competing with Brock Purdy through training camp, this is why GFF existed. Because I thought, I don't think that's true, but let's evaluate things. And like you always said, there is no confidence. He's the starting quarterback for good reason. But they lied. They were lying to you. They lied to you. They lied to you. You can say, I think Trey's better. You can have the opinion that I disagree with. That's fine. But he earned what he did because of that, because he looks like that in games. That's what he has looked like in games so far.
Well, and this gets back to, it's hard in the offseason because there's such a wide gap. And every month that goes by, right, March, May, April, June, as we get through the summer, since the last time you saw people in pads, like playing actual football, even if you go as far as the Niners do. And this is why there are a lot of draft mistakes, because you just get in your own head because you don't have anything to go off of. It's so easy once you see a game to just have a take. You're like, Packers actually might not be terrible. Patriots pretty good defense. Like, you just see it. You just get one game. You just see some act. The preseason games mean such, like, the equity they hold into the decision makers in terms of, there's a difference of, like, God, I think this guy could contribute on special teams, right? I mean, those are the conferences. Not, yeah, I think this guy easily could be our starting quarterback. I got a text today. Did you see the play? Jimmy got, like, thrown to the ground and hit, and it was classic, like, you got to go make sure he doesn't have a concussion. It was one of those plays because he got up slow a little bit. It clearly Jimmy's pissed, like, I'm fine. Classic yank. Again, new rule, yank. I wasn't really paying attention, and I just got a text. Wait, Hoyer's their backup quarterback? Brian Hoyer came into the game, not Aiden O'Connell. And I was like, well, it's a little bit like Purdy last year. Coaches, I don't care if you're Andy, Belichick, or Pete, or the younger versions, you don't, like, lean 22-year-old 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th rounder, right? Now, if Aiden O'Connell, if a bunch of injuries happen and then he goes 8 games and they go 6-2, that completely changes everything forever moving forward in their minds. And I think this was a great example. The preseason didn't mean anything. It meant nothing. I've always believed this to my core. The Sam Darnold addition, who got some snaps, you see, like, Purdy's like, oh, Sam, you know, when they kneeled it.
I mean, in the comments earlier, why did Darnold get the victory formation?
Because they love their quarterback room. As long as Sam just knew the calls in the huddle, it was based on his experience. Everyone's like, oh, it sucked. Not everyone. I mean, the internet, which relative to his stats in football were not a positive. Kyle viewed that as experience. He knows what to do. I'll get him to do the right things.
Yeah, right.
I can see it coming from a mile away.
And the evidence, and McCaffrey's an example of this too. Like, the evidence so far is pretty overwhelming. Offensive players are better when they play for him. He gets their best.
If Kyle doesn't think you're any good, you probably stink. I don't even see how that, like, what's the other side of the argument? Kyle's an
that he's
idiot.
wrong, right? Like, okay, maybe he thought Dante Pettis, it felt like, was useless, and Dante's proved to be an NFL player, right?
I just thought he couldn't play for them. Yeah, he went on to play for other teams, but I mean, there's a difference of, like, you're not good enough to play for us.
Right.
We drafted you too high.
We have a lot of good receivers. Yeah.
If that's your best argument, I'm not saying you are those people, but, like,
I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah, I don't think there's an argument. We can nitpick, like, I don't love that play. Like, do we really need to run McCaffrey? You could nitpick probably Belichick over those 20 years, right? Him and Brady. Like, what are we doing here? Do we need to do this? Bill, do you really need to cut this guy to make a point, right? You can do that with Kyle. But ultimately, his resume is fucking really good at this point. Now it feels like he's really rolling, right? Now it feels like, overdrive, motherfuckers.
Well, as you know, once you get the more experience you have with something, the more comfortable you are to kind of be more creative, and the less you operate out of, like, fear what happens if I fail. Kyle is, I said this to you earlier, like a few months ago, but because I looked at a few months ago, only Andy Reid and Josh McDaniels have coordinated offenses for more consecutive NFL seasons than Kyle Shanahan. He has been in the league, no days off, no suspensions, Sean Payton, for more consecutive years than everybody except 2 other guys. And it's Andy Reid and Josh McDaniels, weirdly enough. I didn't expect that when I did the research. But, I mean, it's almost 20 years he's been coordinating offenses consecutively.
20?
No, it's not 20. It's almost 20. It's like, you got to go back to, we go way back, but it's a long time that he's been doing it. Maybe it's, I could look up the number.
14 or whatever.
Yeah, 15, something like that. It's long. Let me just put a bow on this, because Eddie says people that I'm talking about with the Trey Lance point, Grant Cohn clown emoji. I'm not talking about Grant, actually. There are several people who attended Niner practices that I disagreed with, that I said I thought Darnold was better than Trey. I remember I did that stream the day that Darnold was named the backup with Larry Krueger and John Dickinson, and they both thought that Trey and Darnold had been equal. I did not. So Grant has repeatedly just partly, I think, reported the fact, like, he'd be like, another interception from Brock,
I like Grant. He's very opinionated. He thought
no,
Brock
I know, but
sucked,
I'm just saying, like, I had no problem with that type of stuff. My comment is more for the people who said, like, the media and the Niners are suppressing competition. The media doesn't want to tell you how good Trey has looked. Like, that kind of shit was BS. It was not true. It wasn't true. When it came to the competition you want to talk about competition with Sam, we can disagree about what that competition was like. But when it came to Brock, there was never a point where there should have been anything other than what it was, which was he's the starting quarterback.
I think I'll give my final opinion on this
for today,
because it hit me today. The discourse on quarterbacks with 49ers on the internet, which bled over to talking about it, because a lot of people I talk to, you talk to in real life, look at the internet and see the conversations. Ultimately, I thought was pretty embarrassing, a clown show, and I think was proven to be a complete waste of time. And I'm guilty to get caught in the middle of it. Not that my days of arguing back and forth with people, but listen, the information's the information we have now. I wonder if those people just pretend like they didn't say anything and just move on, and just like August didn't happen. I'd say I'd keep receipts, but then I'd have to care about what those individuals think. I think it also shows you how little people understand, know. Clearly, a lot of people had an agenda. Don't exactly know why, besides just they traded a lot. Who actually cares? The team was good. I completely understand it if the team sucked. Like, I would have had that. Like, why don't you just see what the kid's got? Who cares? He's not any good. And they moved on. They got very, very lucky that they could unload a guy who's not very good and who makes a lot of money and just completely move on and keep it fucking rolling. And that's a testament to the way they built this team for a 4th-round pick. I thought it would. I would have traded him for a 7th as long as you take the money, as long as I didn't have to eat anything if I was the 49ers. And I think ultimately they were probably prepared to. They were getting rid of this guy. And I think, did you send me a text being sarcastic? I think they had mentally moved on. Kyle says 10 days. If that's if a coach is publicly saying that, you could probably add 15. So I mean, they had moved on. I think for a while, guy. And again, it had been well reported by other reporters that this guy was on the table, right? But
Mike Silver said it.
They weren't going to give him away.
A lot of people were comfortable saying it publicly.
Like the Vikings, right? Wanted to trade for him during the draft. Well, they probably wanted to trade a 6th-round pick, which ultimately the 49ers made the right decision. It's like, it's not worth it quite yet. Maybe he looks kind of good. But the preseason, I think it shows you, and we learn this every year, how irrelevant the preseason is. Hell, I kind of got on the Steelers bandwagon because they were awesome in the preseason. Now, they played a bad game, but also 49ers is better than them. Right? I mean, the 49ers won 4 playoff games the last 2 years. Steelers haven't been to the playoffs. They didn't go last year, and they haven't won a playoff game in 7. So it's like they're just a different level. And a big part of that different level is their quarterback. Think about that. Kenny Pickett was drafted number 20. Bad quarterback draft, but still 20 last year. Right? 20 overall. The other dude was drafted, 255 or whatever the exact number is. And he's just better.
Somebody said, I see, we're going to get 2 minutes of Lance on every show. If he plays, if you're listening to this Monday and he led the Cowboys to a win over the Giants, then I guess we could go emergency pod on that. Let's rattle off some other takes from the Niners opener.
I mean, Ayuk was a star today. He just dominated. He's going to do that. The 49ers are going to be in a precarious situation. I'd say if his just overall numbers get to 85 and 10, and then whatever the yards, I mean, whether it's 1,000 or 1,200 or 900, if it looks like that, and he has a high 8 or low 9 in front of his catch number and a double-digit touchdown, then we see what wide receivers make. Just it would get complicated, right? It's been complicated because I think they know how good he is. He knows his worth on the open market, right? Let me hit the open market. Christian Kirk did. See what I'll get paid. Because I'll promise you this: if Brandon Ayuk were to hit the open market, someone would give him 4 for 100 and guarantee 65, 70, right?
Yeah.
Whether is he truly a $25 million? Are the Niners willing to give him $20 million? I don't know. I think it's a very in the moment situation. It's a good situation to have because he's on your team and he's awesome and he's clearly really into the season. He's got a lot of money to make. But I do think macro, it's somewhat of a problem.
We'll just restructure 7 other. Jed will just cut some big checks, John, move some money around.
I felt they did that more for I think there are going to be some teams tanking, and we're going to be in position to trade a second rounder for the best player on all those teams combined.
Yeah, it could be.
That's what it felt like. Oh, you got a $20 million guy you're going to unload? We'll take the entire salary, and actually we'll only give you a 4th because we got all this salary cap space.
Right.
Because that's
Here's
a huge.
Jerry's 4th.
You actually have to give up less when you got the cap space, right?
That's right.
I don't know exactly. I mean, is there Lane Johnson available?
Mike Evans?
The 49ers don't really need him, but
no,
that guy.
Career high receiving for Ayuk, by the way, 129. He's never started a season fast in the opener like he did today either. 8 catches. I mean, he's a 136 catch pace. But you're right. It was a continuation of, for all the talk about, and even though it didn't translate for the Steelers, I do think there's something to what was Tomlin's thing? Like you spar, so you spar before a big fight, or what was that line?
Yeah, like you don't get in the ring without sparring.
Yeah, you don't get in the ring. The Niners, who are the 2 guys that, and it wasn't just me, it was everybody that went to a practice, said repeatedly, Brandon Ayuk and Christian McCaffrey are practicing harder than everybody. Well, guess what? the season started and they combined for 283 or something like that. I mean, it was they looked like they'd been ready for the season, and that's what they look like at the beginning of the training camp. They looked like they were ready for the season, and guess what? The season started, and they were the two of the best players on the field. I thought I don't know what the Niners' average defensive line arm length is versus the rest of the league. Maybe when these guys wear white sleeves, their arms look huge. Eric Armstead, Drake Jackson had 3 sacks today, twice last year's total.
And he's pretty good.
Cleveland Ferrell even looked pretty good. Kinlaw looked solid. Hargrave had a sack and was good. Eric Armstead was really, really good. Eric Armstead was fantastic. And Bosa, while maybe got a little gassed, he really affected the pocket too, bothered the run game. He was, I mean, just they look really good up front for a team that I do think probably lacks a little depth. Oh my God.
I think their defense looked elite. I mean, if that's going to be their defense, that's the best defense in the league. If they're going to play like that, because Nick didn't even technically have a sack today, correct?
Nick did not have a sack. It was
They did yank him late. Kyle treated him a little different. McCaffrey, once they got a lead, they kind of kept him on the side, like we're not going to pull a hammy here. But yeah, man, that's their defense is freaking unreal because they have one thing they've done now is the other group of corners beside Ward are more than functional. Like they got a lot that can just play.
And their safeties their safeties make plays too, right?
Their safeties are playmakers for sure. And their linebackers are everywhere. Right? So if you're not throwing a bomb, which I would say will be an area that they're always going to be susceptible to, as are most teams that don't have like Deion Sanders in his prime. Most passes, though, are, I would say, 12 yards past the line of scrimmage and in. Well, you got 57 and 54 flanked out both sides. So those guys, even if you do hit it, they just get there so fast. And Hufanga and Gibson, their D linemen run. So if you are just throwing anything around the line of scrimmage, their D line's flying around.
I think Hufanga could run option quarterback. And I forgot about it today. I know a guy named
Great
Alex.
idea. He almost pulled it off, too.
Almost pulled it off. It was just a little too much momentum. He was going too fast. But a buddy of mine, Alex Brink, played quarterback at Washington State. Like
Ward's faster than
quarterback.
him, too. I think that's who
he told me he was his quarterback coach. Like he was his personal, because he texted me this like, I don't know, a month ago. He was like, how does Hufanga look in camp? I'm like, it looks excellent, blah, blah, blah. He's like, I was his like quarterback coach when he was in high school. So he was not bad. Obviously he made the right choice, but he can run it. I thought if you had told me we won't talk about Moody until 48 minutes into the pod, I'd say, I bet it was a pretty good day. It was an excellent day for Moody. He drilled 3 field goals, 41, 32, and 40. Made 3 extra points, including one that was 38 because they got to delay a game or a false start or whatever it was. Pretty good. I don't have anything else to add. We can move on from that topic.
Yeah, I would say the special teams unit as a whole. Wisnowski, good day, doing the punts within the 10 yards and in, was really good at that. Ray looks clearly the arm's better. He's back.
Yep.
And if they're making field goals, that unit. Listen, Wisnowski's a weird player because he doesn't feel exactly like Ray Guy out there, even though he's spoken about in like the analytical community about his punts. He is really good about the pin punting, and that is an important thing because there was the one time we're like, well, I saw Moody when Moose was like he was hitting 60-yarders, no problem. I'm like, I don't know if I'd try that right here. If you were more, to me, if he had earned the equity, it would be impossible, even if he had made every kick in the preseason. But still, like. You're a year away. Maybe you're just like, fuck it. Because what the Ravens have done right there, they would have kicked a field goal.
They probably would have.
The Raiders would have kicked a field goal. All the good teams that have faith in their big leg kicker.
I thought it was pretty it was a great example of what the NFL is, right? Of just the heartless nature of, I don't give a fuck about you. I'm trying to win. That's what this is. This is a real business. Tomlin could have ended Moody's career with trying to ice him in the first quarter of the game. And then on 4th and 11, it was a 4th and 11. He's like, fuck it, let's try and block it. And I was like, I think they were okay getting the offsides just to get in Moody's dome when Patrick Peterson blocked it, but they were like so far offsides. And then Moody drilled the kick. If Moody somehow misses that kick, it could all go downhill from there.
What if I told you they did that on purpose? Is that crazy to think?
No, John, I do think they did it on purpose. I think they called
Yeah.
the timeout for sure. And then I think it was like 4th and 11. So even if we're offsides,
They're
doesn't
still
matter.
gonna kick.
Yeah. So just go for it, block the kick, and get in his dome.
Yeah, he already got rattled this offseason.
Yeah. So nitpicks, Colton. I mean, if you were going to nitpick, you'd say the Ambry thing, I guess. But like you said, their third best corner is fine. McKivitz, I'd argue, TJ Watt.
I think that's the fair argument. I wonder if the gap between Watt and Bosa is as big as is there a big one? Like, is he just in the crew of
It's $4 million.
Bosa, Parsons, Watt, separate from the money? Just what's he worth today? Feels like more than he got.
Well, he felt every bit as good as Nick Bosa today.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like but when like Nick is playing normal, right in the middle, like when he's just had a training camp and he looks just like that. McKivitz could not block Nick Bosa. We know that for a fact.
Right.
Listen, the 49ers have played for the last 5 years with an offensive tackle at that position, the right tackle, that did the same thing. Can't pass block. Now, I thought today it looks – part of McGlinchey was he's so tall he can't bend over. The one – I'm trying to think. It was either the first or the second one. It's like, is McKivitz even trying? Is he even trying? Or is it one of those where if you strike out, you don't swing, it just looks like you're not trying? So you beat him by so fast. They do have to be careful. They're just going to play a lot of teams this year. They play the Cowboys. They obviously play the Eagles. I mean, I would imagine when you play next week the Rams, I'd put Aaron Donald over there. Remember They did that a couple years ago when the Niners had injuries at those positions. They would put Donald at the end. You're going to get players over there because you're not going to put them at. Talk about a scare. When Trent's going like this, I'm like, oh, my God, did he just tear a muscle or break a rib?
I know.
He just did one of these, and he got right back.
Joshua gave us $2 to say Colton's going to get Brock hurt, $42 million cap space.
The problem is there's no one trades like
serviceable.
Sweet right tackles just don't.
Forget sweet. You don't get serviceables.
Well, I just don't think offensive linemen that are any good. For all the players that have been traded over the trading, if we wanted to consider this the trading generation, the Ramseys, the Max, you just name it. Laramie Tunsil's really the only tackle that got traded, and it was just like the Dolphins were tanking that year. It wasn't they didn't trade him thinking he sucked or whatever. It's like, we're just going to tank for Tua. And they got Bill O'Brien to give him like 2 1s and 2 2s.
Orlando Brown.
But the Chiefs didn't resign him.
Yeah. Trent Brown?
Unique case.
Fred Warner's the alpha of the entire team, says Tobin. Yeah, I think he is.
Podcaster,
Eric Armstead, podcaster. As several people tweeted at me today, Kyle Juszczyk, listener, because they remembered that Juice came on the show and said he listens after wins.
Yeah.
So, hi to Juice.
If you can't listen to a podcast after a 30-7 shellacking, it's got to be a pretty fun ride home.
What if Juice was just stewing right now on the plane? Like, no fucking touches. We beat these motherfuckers by 27. I couldn't get a goddamn carry.
I thought they'd give him like a screen or something.
Jennings had 1 target. That's it. And it was
Wasn't
the
even that
PBU
open
by
on the
Patrick
target.
Peterson. It was Pat Peterson made a really good play on it. So that's the thing. They can even spread it around more. But Colts win or lose today? Anything else on the Niner game?
I just think anytime that after a season where, or just I would even say the Kyle era of starting slow, it's one thing to win. Obviously, it's the NFL. You don't get style points. This is not college football. No one cares what the final score is. Like, ultimately, the Raiders are a good example. All that matters is 1-0, right? Not 17-16. If the Niners would have won 17-16 today, that would have been fine. But there is something. Hell, the Eagles, right? They won 25-20, but I bet they're not feeling great about it, right? Because most people don't think the Pats are that good. I'm not saying they're feeling bad because you celebrate wins, but the Niners are feeling pretty good.
Yeah, 9.
Hey, we knew we were good. We came in and we just strangleholded them. I mean, the game it's never over at half just because of the NFL, weird things happen. But looking back, it was over at halftime.
It was over at halftime. Weren't the Eagles a very high scoring first quarter team last year? Wasn't that a stat?
Yeah, it was the third quarter where they couldn't score.
Well, today, 16 points in the first quarter, 9 points in the second half. Let's just rattle through a few other.
I do think the Pats are good on defense. So
Yeah.
it's like on the road. To me, the 49ers have to look around and go, Seattle lost this Cowboy-Giants game. These two teams are going to be good. Obviously, the Eagles' record, they're going to be good when the dust settles, but this is our conference to win. I think that's the way they're looking at it.
Yep.
This is how they looked at it last year, once Purdy got in the saddle. With this quarterback, because even I think Barrows had the tweet, right? The last couple years, they've just started so weird. This year, it felt like they started like the cocaine bear. And it's like, yeah, the quarterback upgrade does wonders.
Barrows said that?
Like, yeah.
Good tweet.
It's the quarterback changed. Because the players, obviously, they added McCaffrey, but they've always had the sweet offensive weapons. Trent Williams has been on the team for a while. All these guys on defense have been around. The quarterback. Like, that's the quarterback. Your drives last longer when you complete 3rd and 7s, right? And score touchdowns and not field goals. So instead of it being like, oh, it's 9-7, it's 20-7. Like that, there's dramatic difference of how is the Niners have dominated this game and it's 10-7. What the fuck's going on? You look up and it's multiple scores. So even when you screw up and even when they score, the gap is still wide. That to me is the difference right now.
Patrick says the Pickett over Brock bandwagon's awfully empty. I didn't even know that existed until I listened to Pittsburgh radio last week, and a guy was like, all right, rank Pickett. And the other guy's like, 6th. I was like, oh, okay. Cool. All right, John, you want to
I think you'll get the same thing if you listen to
100%.
You
No,
drive around tomorrow,
totally.
flip on the old local radio.
Brock is 4th. Let's instant reactions NFL, either just a couple other takes from around the games today or other things you noticed. I'll just give you a piece of history. The Colts still haven't won an opener now going back to 2013. They lost today to the Jags 31-21.
I think if you're them, you're cool losing a lot of games and just having the quarterback who had some moments look okay.
Yeah. Did you think he looked okay?
I do wonder.
Much of it?
I mean, I had it on one of the little boxes. Anyone that says they're watching 7 boxes at one time and see everything that's going on. He ran for a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
He threw a pick. He
got hit hard on the goal line.
I do understand why you draft that and you just hope, right? Because even he's much farther along than like Trey. Obviously, he played at Florida. But like the Kenny Pickett's and even the Brocks and Max, those guys have to be perfect usually to reach their ceiling. And ultimately, their ceiling is much lower than a lot of the elite guys. So I understand both sides of it, right? Like when Kenny Pickett's bad, it looks really bad because he's not really bringing much else to the table. It's like one conversation I do think that's going to grow is like, could Shador be the number 1 overall pick? He's got a long way to go.
In what year?
Caleb's played I'm saying right now, like what the hell's the difference between him and Caleb Williams?
Oh, I think Caleb's better. I think Caleb's more. I think you could put Caleb on a team with I think Caleb's more likely to thrive with just a bad offensive coordinator and no weapons. But you're right. I mean, Shador made a play.
We're judging him off 2 games.
Crazy.
I'm just saying, like, we might look 12 games back. And again, no one thinks Shador's going to come out. Probably, we're so far away from even having that conversation. But would you assume that most people, or would you agree that most people assume that Shador's going to stay with Travis Hunter and Deion for 2 years?
Yeah, I do think that's what people think. Unless is Deion coaching Michigan State and takes Shador with him? I mean, that Shador you'd have to get a waiver to transfer twice, so probably not.
Yeah,
Although the waiver would be like, hey, my dad, I got to go with my family.
But why would Deion go to Michigan State?
Well, I don't know.
To me,
$90 million.
Yeah, but he'll get that no matter what.
So I actually saw a sneaky candidate for that's their OC. But anyway.
I do think one of the stories today is if the Rams – I think the Rams were going to be terrible. And every time I looked up, Stafford he made some big-time throws. Cooper Kupp's on injury reserve. Aaron Donald was killing their defensive line or offensive line. I
did not think the Rams were going to be terrible because I think McVay has a high floor, even though I know they were terrible last year. But
when I say terrible, they don't have any players.
Oh, I know. No, Puka Nacua, John. 10 for 119. Somebody asked, are the Packers good or the Bears bad?
The Bears are bad. But I do think the Packers – listen, Rodgers is a really good player. He's been on just good teams. They have a lot of good players. They've had a ton of first-round picks on defense. Quay Walker was making plays today. Their defensive line is full of former first rounders. Jair Alexander. Like they got legitimate NFL guys that would start on all the teams. And then weapons wise, Aaron Jones got injured today. Like Aaron Jones is a real fucking player.
I think their coach
Watson
is
last
good.
year, I think, had 8 or 9 touchdowns. He didn't play because his hamstring. But like that guy is an elite speed. The dude they drafted from North Dakota State.
Not
Deshaun Watson. Something Watson.
Yeah. I think their coach is good. And I think their quarterback is skilled, even though his, you look at the box score, it wasn't great. But every time I looked up, he's just so smooth as a thrower, I think. I don't know if you saw his like throwback throw, which was really athletic.
Yeah, I give more credit to LaFleur on that. Like Fields would have made that throw.
I just mean that, yeah. Well, Fields is athletic too. I'm just saying, I think Love has like this baseline of athleticism that's pretty exciting, even though the box score doesn't always look good. I just think he looks really good throwing the ball. I don't know if you agree with that.
One thing I do think is going to age pretty well, and I'm going to have to take the L for this, is Fields just might not be an NFL quarterback at a high enough level that you can win with. He can take off and run, but he's I don't know. He averaged 5 yards a pass today. 5.8.
First time that somebody other than Rodgers or Favre started week 1 for the Packers since 1992 was the nugget on that game. Bears I saw you tweet this today. Bears have Carolina's pick.
Yeah, so it's not. They could have 2 top 5 picks. Get Caleb Williams and I don't know, some sweet offensive lineman.
Or take the second best quarterback and somebody else sweet.
Exactly.
Derek Carr won his debut with the Saints, John, 16-15 over the Titans. Thriller there. Tannehill was
game-winning throw?
I did not see it. Was it legit?
It was just, third and 8.
Oh, I got to go
Hit
back.
A big throw down the sideline. This is a big win. I don't think they could afford to lose week 1 at home. Even though the Titans are clearly a scrappy squad. I mean, they're not going to be an easy out, at least early. But I think Derek had to win that game. Just to ingratiate himself, he basically had the game-winning throw. I do think it helps just getting some positive momentum. Him and Jimmy are good examples of, listen, they're not good enough to just – they need things on their side with people rooting for them. Like, I can live with this because they're going to do enough that drives you nuts.
You might have guessed it by the score. That was the only touchdown of the game.
Who?
That touchdown that you were talking about.
No, the touchdown, he had a throw that basically iced the game.
Oh, okay.
The touchdown was nice. It was in a tight spot. Yeah, it was just classic field goal game. Every time it was 9-6, 9-9. Titans, I think Tannehill threw 3 picks.
I got to tell you, man, I'm worn out on the Niners 10 a.m. kick after 2 back-to-back weeks of big noon kickoff game, must-watch 9 a.m. Saturday games.
Yeah.
Then the 10 a.m. game came up on me today. College game day is at Colorado State, and big noon kickoff is at Colorado State. Neither of them is broadcasting the game.
But that's not a 9 a.m. kickoff, correct?
No. It's a 7:30 game. Those poor guys are going to have to wait all day to play, or maybe it's a 7. But Deion Sanders is the center of the universe right now.
I mean, they got to be a big favorite in that game, don't they?
Yeah, I haven't looked, but I would guess it's 30 points. I mean, they are. They didn't even play that well in the first half against Nebraska, and they ended up scoring almost 40 points again. They played Oregon.
I do think Nebraska is actually probably decent on defense.
Yeah. Their quarterback is a crazy situation. Matt Rule's got himself there. Any other takes to get on the record today?
It does make me sad because, as the Pac-12's ending, this is easily the best they've ever been. Right?
8 top 25 teams. Only the SEC's done that before.
But how many teams do you think like legit playoff contenders they have? 4?
Yeah, 4.5. Oregon State's schedule is really good, and they're good on defense, and they run the ball. So that would be the other team. I'm with you. I know, but their schedule is just better than everybody else's schedule in the league in terms of. I'm with you. I mean, they're probably not.
When does Cam Rising come back?
I think DJU's. DJU is clearly an upgrade. I don't think he's ever going to become like the guy that people thought he was going to be. Probably this week for Cam Rising. Maybe they play Weber State, so maybe this week. I would expect him back this week or next. He was fully cleared last week to whatever that meant because he didn't play. But they won 2 games with their 3rd and 4th string quarterbacks. So I think it's still. I actually after 2 weeks think it's them as long as Cam Rising's back. That's the best team in the league.
Their defense is high end, and this is we'll see with USC when they start playing better teams.
But you're just going to have to. You're going to have to score 40
games.
points, John, to beat them.
Yeah,
right.
Their defense
to beat SC. Oregon does play in weird games.
He's not. Listen, a quarterback will, even if you're Caleb Williams, like going to go down as an all-time great college player and be the number one pick. You're going to have a bad game, and does that bad game come against Arizona State when it doesn't matter, or does it come against Utah and you're down 7 points going into the third quarter? One of those. That to me, because you're not going to play a season where it's just easy. But I think works out that way.
No, it's true. But I think it's kind of like what you saw from Colorado, what we've seen from Utah as a team the last 2 weeks, where they neither played like a perfect game this week and still won. Caleb, even if he's not playing his best game, can just still beat you, right? He can still pull rabbits out of the hat. So Washington has not been tested at all, but they're lighting it up. I think Kalen DeBoer, our boy John, is now 93-11 as a head coach.
But here's the thing. I know they have highly rated NFL guys on defense. Like they got the number one pass rusher out west. We know they always got NFL defenders right in the defensive backfield. Like having those bodies to me matters. And I know Oregon has them too. That's why it's just
we'll see. I mean, Tulsa kind of ran the ball on them the other day.
Who?
So Washington.
Yeah, I mean,
my point is, I'm running down the list. Twice. Like, I think there's 8 top 25 teams, and all of them are kind of 8 top 25 teams. UCLA's in there. Their 5-star quarterback threw for 290 and 3 touchdowns on Saturday night.
Yeah, that's my point. I mean, USC, Utah, Oregon, Washington are clearly like a Power 4 in whatever order, depending on the week. And I'd say Colorado's the wild card right now because if we just look back and go, Shedeur Sanders turned into like Michael Vick meets Peyton Manning, like they're going to be a lot better than you think,
right?
Because he had an incompletion yesterday where he layered it. It was like, oh my God. And then he had the one where he rolled to his left and threw like a 700-mile-an-hour strike. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think he's got some Caleb Williams, the instincts and shit to it. What if he's just Caleb Williams? He's fucking Deion Sanders' son.
He's so comfortable.
Like, if he was just Shedeur Sanders and they were doing what they were doing and Deion was not Deion Sanders, he was just like the next Lincoln Riley of defense or whatever. Just like, God, this guy's going to be a star college coach. Urban Meyer back in the day at Utah. I think sometimes you have to say he's Deion Sanders' son, arguably the greatest athlete of our 40 years of or 38, 37 years of life. That guy's kid. So whenever I'm like, this guy really could be that good. Well, look who his dad is. It's come so easy to him. Now, 2 weeks at Oregon is going to be that game. What's he like in there? It's going to be.
I think the thing about him is he's just looked really comfortable with everything. I mean, he got sacked a lot the other day, but he doesn't look rattled by anything, which, to your point.
I would as well pick Washington. I would pick Washington and Utah would be my 2 teams.
I think I would take Utah and SC at this point.
Oh, because you don't have to win the South and North, huh?
Yeah.
So schedule matters.
Schedule matters, but they all play each other for the most part. So, anyway. All right.
Yeah.
Any other takes to get off? Anything else we got to say today?
I just might go watch Shedeur highlights. Shedeur has a much better chance to win the Heisman than Travis because it's impossible to have game in, game out where you just like 2 picks and 3 touchdowns on offense. Right. Like that's just not sustainable.
And it's already in people's minds pretty early, right? He already had kind of those Heisman moments. And I think the great thing for Colorado is they play so many good teams that they're going to have a lot of opportunities to make statements. Like if they beat Oregon in 2 weeks, it's on. Like it is. You think it's on now? It is really on. If they beat Oregon in 2 weeks,
could Shedeur, if USC were to go to 11-1 and they went 9-3, could Shedeur still win the Heisman?
Say it again. Numbers? If he goes 11-3, is that what you said?
No, if he goes like 9-3, right?
Oh,
they lose some games and they just lose one.
I think Caleb looks pretty excellent again. Like I think he'd be hard to beat. Like if you're saying if SC
history of USC,
you say like if SC wins the league and Colorado has a good but doesn't win the league type year.
Yeah, not even win the league.
Does that guy ever? Does a 9-win guy win the Heisman? Does that happen?
Yeah, I don't know.
Doesn't feel like it, right?
No. But you don't always have to be a national. Like a lot of guys go on like 8-9 win teams. They're just usually not the Caleb at the sweet team.
You're saying there's a lot of Heisman winners that won 8 or 9
I think
games?
there's a lot of Heisman. Forever like Cam Newton that wins the national championship, like RG3, some of those guys were not on, playoff national championship teams. Obviously, it was different back in the day. Johnny Manziel was on like 9-win teams.
You don't think, did Baylor like win the Big 12 that year? I would guess.
Yeah, I mean they were really 100%. They were really, really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like if you go 10-2, like if you have Washington's year last year, 10-2, but some tiebreaker, you don't make the playoff. Is that good enough? I mean, Penix was like 8th in the Heisman voting last year, led the nation in passing. I think if that happened,
Penix would have to beat all these teams. To me, Shador is in a different category.
So if that happens, Shador is definitely in New York. If they win 10 games, he's in New York for sure. I don't know if he'd win it, but
I think if they win like 8+ and he just has an incredible year, he's going to New York.
Yeah, ESPN is like, he's coming.
I think if I was a betting man right now, and I don't think they're going to win 11 games, but I'm not betting against them. They're probably more likely to win 8 or 9 than 11. Even if they win 8 or 9, I think Shador has a decent chance to be in New York. I would bet right now he's headed to New York.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a good
Cowboys
bet.
are dominating the Giants. Cowboys have beat the Giants 11 of their last 12 times.
The Giants are just, I guess we'll see them in a few. How about the Browns sneaky?
Sometimes these click off.
Browns sneaky look good today, John. That's a Niners game. That's a Niners. That's a Niners game in a few week 6. Browns coming off a bye. Niners go there. Niners have a stretch coming up, but anyway, we can get to that at a later date.
Adios.
All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging today. Like and subscribe on your way out the door. Podcaster listeners, we appreciate you. And we'll talk to everybody soon. Later.